Greetings, everyone. When we talk about the most brutal rulers in human history, the name Nero will undoubtedly be the first to leap out. He is remembered with a chilling image, a madman playing his lyre while Rome burned to ashes. Nero's fame, or rather infamy, was so profound that even historians shuddered when documenting his reign. So, who was he really? And just how brutal did he get? Was he simply a deranged lunatic, as the whispers suggest? Or are there more complex layers hidden behind the legend of this monstrous emperor? Today, we will explore the true story of Nero Claudius Caesar, the fifth and final emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Are you ready to face the most depraved and cruel acts Nero ever committed? To truly understand Nero, we need to rewind to a time before he donned the purple robes of an emperor. Born in 37 AD, Nero was the result of a union between Agrippina and her cousin. Agrippina, a woman renowned for her beauty and intelligence, harbored an extraordinarily vast ambition. Historical sources reveal that loneliness and a thirst for power had deeply seeped into her very being from an early age. Nero's father was described as brutal and coarse, even committing murder and provoking disputes. When Nero was just 2 years old, his father passed away, leaving the boy an orphan. At the same time, his mother, Agrippina, was exiled by Emperor Caligula, who was also her brother, forcing Nero to endure a childhood raised by slaves and those without social standing. But Agrippina was not one to easily accept her fate. When Caligula was assassinated, a golden opportunity unfolded. By some miracle, she managed to return and began a sinister plan to seize ultimate power. Agrippina used her beauty and cunning to seduce Emperor Claudius, her own uncle. Not only did she become empress, but she also convinced Claudius to adopt Nero as his son and heir. This was a bold move, as Claudius already had his own daughter, Claudia Octavia, whom Nero would later be forced to marry. The climax of this manipulation was the sudden death of Emperor Claudius. Although he was an emperor who had always been robust, historians recorded that Agrippina had poisoned him with deadly mushrooms. While some debate the true cause of his death, the event undeniably revealed Agrippina's ruthlessness and iron resolve in clearing the path for her son to ascend the throne. Not long after, at the tender age of 17, Nero effortlessly inherited the throne, becoming the youngest Roman emperor to date. However, the imperial throne did not immediately grant Nero freedom. In the beginning, he was constantly overshadowed by his mother's immense power. Agrippina sought to wield absolute authority through her son, and she did not hesitate to meddle in every aspect of his reign. So, did the manipulation and the treacherous environment in which Nero grew up truly shape a monster? Or was it merely the catalyst that unveiled a depravity already lurking within him? Agrippina made no secret of her ambitions. She craved absolute power, wielded through her son. Even the minting of coins featuring her image alongside Nero's shows her desire to modify the system so she could have even more power. She was a powerful, resolute woman who refused to be controlled by anyone, not even her own son. But Nero's extravagant nature, his promiscuity, and his insistence on discarding his lawful wife Octavia for another deeply disappointed Agrippina. Nero began illicit affairs with Acte and then Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea Sabina, who later became Nero's mistress and second wife, is believed by some historians to have urged Nero to murder his mother, divorce, and then execute Octavia. Agrippina vehemently opposed these relationships, sensing her own power beginning to crumble. The tension between mother and son reached its breaking point. Agrippina, realizing Nero was becoming increasingly stubborn and determined to break free from her control, resolved to depose him. But Nero was a step faster. He decided to strike at his mother first. Nero's plan to murder his own mother was truly chilling. He devised an intricate trap on her very own yacht. A section of the vessel was engineered to detach, plunging Agrippina into the sea. It was a perfectly staged act designed to make the death appear as a tragic accident. However, Agrippina's fate was not so easily sealed. With an incredible will to survive, she struggled and managed to swim to shore. When news of his mother's survival reached Nero, he panicked completely. Without hesitation, he dispatched the assassin Anicetus to pursue her relentlessly and ensure the plan was fully executed. And here is the most horrifying moment, a peak that haunts history. When the assassin Anicetus arrived, Nero's mother, in the final moments of her ambitious and treacherous life, screamed at him a line filled with bitter hatred and despair. "Strike down my womb, for it bore such a monstrosity." This dying declaration not only conveyed physical pain, but also the profound revulsion of a mother towards the very son she birthed, the son for whom she had cleared the path, sacrificing everything to elevate him to the pinnacle of power. Agrippina's death marked a dark turning point. Nero was officially freed from the golden hoop, escaping the influence of his autocratic mother. But it was also the moment he crossed the moral boundary, plunging into absolute tyranny. From this point, Nero began to expand his depravity and terrifying nature without control. After eliminating the mother who created him, just how unimaginable would Nero's monstrous acts become? After his mother's death, Nero plunged into a series of unfathomable, brutal and depraved acts, revealing the horrifying extent of power's corruption. First came the tragic fate of Octavia, his first wife. After killing his mother, Nero divorced Octavia and exiled her to an island. But the Roman public, who still held affection for Octavia, vehemently opposed this action. Under public pressure, Nero took his cruelty even further. He falsely accused Octavia of adultery, a blatant lie, and ordered her execution. Octavia's head was severed and sent to Poppaea, Nero's new wife, as a trophy. This act not only demonstrated Nero's boundless brutality, but also his absolute disregard for law and morality. Poppaea Sabina is believed to have incited Nero to eliminate Octavia so they could marry. But the official reason given was the false adultery accusation. However, the event that shook the entire Roman Empire and remains a dark stain on Nero's history is the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. This terrifying inferno spread and raged for 5 continuous days, severely destroying nearly half of Rome, turning tens of thousands of structures into ashes, and leaving countless people dead or homeless. The most iconic image associated with this disaster is that Nero was said to have played his lyre and sung amidst the ruins while the flames devoured the city. Many believed that Nero himself was the mastermind behind the fire, aiming to clear land to build a more magnificent new palace for himself. And indeed, immediately after the disaster, Nero ordered the construction of a colossal and unimaginably lavish structure, the Domus Aurea, Golden House. This palace spanned 300 hectares, with floors paved with gold, pearls, ivory, and precious stones. To complete this insane masterpiece, Nero drained the wealth of the remaining provinces of the Roman Empire, causing intense outrage among the populace and the nobility. However, there are other perspectives on the Great Fire of Rome. Some modern scholars seriously question whether Nero actually caused the fire. They argue that Rome at Nero's time had very narrow streets. Houses were mostly made of wood, and fire was the main source of heat for lighting, cooking, and warming. Consequently, large fires occurred during the reigns of most emperors. Furthermore, the fire broke out when Nero was not in Rome but in Antium, his birthplace. Upon being informed of the fire, the emperor immediately returned to the capital, where he personally led rescue efforts, aided victims, and enacted and enforced fire safety laws. Even Tacitus, a historian who lived during Nero's era and actively denounced him, wrote that no one knew whether the fire of Rome was intentional or accidental. Nevertheless, one undeniable fact is that Nero benefited from the fire to build his palace. To quell opposition and appease public opinion, Nero blamed Christians for instigating the fire. This marked the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in the history of religious persecution. And the forms of torture Nero inflicted upon Christians were truly horrific, far exceeding all limits of barbarity. They were beheaded, crucified, fed to wild beasts in the circus, drowned in boiling oil, or forced to impersonate animals for Nero's hunts. More shockingly, many were even burned alive as human torches during his decadent feasts. These were the extreme moments of cruelty, a spectacle that even modern horror films would struggle to replicate in its depravity and callousness. Nero's private life was also riddled with unimaginable depravity and perverse acts. He organized lavish and debauched parties that lasted for weeks. Guests were encouraged to eat their fill and then vomit to continue enjoying themselves. As for Nero himself, to stay sober and continue the revelry, he constantly bathed in cold water or snow. In these feasts, Nero's favorite pastime was torturing and tormenting others in incredibly perverse and cruel ways, to a degree of perversion that even modern horror films might fall short of. When he tired of palace parties, Nero would travel. Unlike other emperors who journeyed to observe their people, Nero would disguise himself to rob, assault women, and pick fights with ordinary citizens for his own twisted pleasure. It may sound unbelievable, but these were the actions of an emperor wielding immense power amidst his own people. And one of Nero's most disturbing personal acts, which astonishes even many modern historians, concerned the death of his second wife, Poppaea Sabina. Initial accounts record that Nero brutally kicked his pregnant second wife to death during an argument. This act was considered proof of his madness. However, many believe this was merely a fake Nero, an image fabricated by the Roman Senate and his political enemies to defame him. The more widely accepted truth today is that Poppaea died due to severe complications related to childbirth. In fact, a Greek poem suggests her last words were an expression of love for Nero. This truth makes even more sense when considering Nero's subsequent actions. The contradiction lies in the fact that after Poppaea's death, Nero continued to feel so much remorse that several years later, he encountered a young boy named Sporus, who looked exactly like his deceased wife. And this is the most horrifying peak, an unimaginable manifestation of his madness. Nero immediately treated the boy as his late wife's replacement. He ordered people to transform Sporus from a boy into a girl, even holding a public wedding ceremony before all the people, treating and intimately referring to the boy as if he were a true empress. This is one of the acts that most clearly demonstrates the psychological and sexual distortion of this emperor. Beyond his brutal and debauched behavior, Nero also considered himself a great artist, even being dubbed by some as the world's first rock star. He recruited a special army of 5,000 soldiers, known as the Augustans, whose sole duty was to applaud and praise him whenever he sang. Nero took his performing career incredibly seriously, adhering to a strict diet and rigorous training. He even toured Greece, participated in and won 1,800 competitions, then granted himself a triumphal procession back to Rome. This shows his artistic obsession, but also a manifestation of his self-absorption and megalomania. However, Nero's extreme extravagance and lavish lifestyle pushed the Roman Empire into the abyss. The construction of the Golden House, along with endless parties, drained Rome's treasury, leading to a severe inflation crisis and eroding public trust. He was extravagant, promiscuous, bloodthirsty, and perverse, causing the country to sink deeper into decline. Nero's power further waned as he lost his trusted advisors. After his mother's death, figures like Burrus also passed away, and the philosopher Seneca was forced to resign. Nero began to be surrounded by sycophants and Poppaea, who are believed to have derailed him from the path of proper governance. Seneca's execution after the Pisonian conspiracy in 65 AD was also a great loss of intellect and counsel for Nero. Public and aristocratic dissatisfaction grew steadily. Rebellions constantly erupted to overthrow him. The clearest omen of his downfall came in March 68, when the governor of Gaul revolted, declaring support for Galba, the governor of Hispania. Although Nero's loyalists tried to suppress it, the emperor's enemies gained the support of most of the army. When the legions in Egypt blocked vital grain fleets, Nero lost the support of the Roman people entirely. Finally, the Roman Senate declared Nero an enemy of the state, hostis. Facing a desperate situation, abandoned by all allies, Nero was forced to flee the capital. He knew that if captured alive, he would face a gruesome fate. Being tried and almost certainly executed in the ancient manner, stripped naked, his head clamped into a tree branch, and stoned to death. In a final dramatic act to control his own destiny, Nero decided to commit suicide. He compelled one of his few remaining loyalists, his secretary Epaphroditus, to carry out the deed. According to Suetonius, Nero's last words before dying at the age of 30 or 31 in 68 AD were, "What an artist dies with me." This violent death ended the glorious Julio-Claudian dynasty, ushering in a new era of political chaos in Rome. The power vacuum left by Nero's death immediately became a target for the most powerful figures in the empire. A bloody civil war erupted, known as the Year of the Four Emperors, Annus Quatuor Imperatorum, in 69 AD, where four emperors successively ruled Rome for a brief period. Ultimately, Vespasian emerged victorious, establishing the new Flavian dynasty, bringing stability to the empire. Nero's legacy is a chaotic mess of brutality, extravagance, and madness, which continues to make historians studying his era shudder. He became a symbol of absolute power's corruption. However, Nero's story is not simply that of a mad tyrant. After his death, several impostors claiming to be Nero appeared in various parts of the Roman Empire, even during Domitian's reign, 20 years after his death. This is the clearest evidence that Nero still commanded support from the common people, those who saw him as their protector. This is a lesser-known perspective, in stark contrast to the severe condemnations from the elite, especially the senators, who wrote history and made every effort to defame the enemy they hated as a tyrant and a madman. Early Christian historians also blame Nero for persecuting believers, turning him into an enemy of God. So what do you think? Was Nero the most brutal emperor in Roman history? Please leave your comments below to share your thoughts and perspectives. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next fascinating and dramatic historical stories.